best, coolest, most expert guests that we could possibly have. And it's Shawna Karrasch and Jessie Hillegas. And when I saw their names on my calendar for Ask an Expert coming up, I was like, please let me be the host of this episode. And sure enough, I fell on this episode. You likely know about their work in positive reinforcement. Shawna has been a guest on InStride in the past, and of course was the pioneer of positive reinforcement in the equestrian world. And her story is fascinating. And Jessie's story really gives us insight into a very relatable position. So I'll let her tell that side of the story. But we're going to get just the perfect combination of color for you guys so that we can talk about positive reinforcement, what the possibilities are, what some misconceptions are, how you can integrate it into your training, or maybe you want to adopt it entirely and this takes you on a whole new path. But we have so much that we can get into, and we're going to touch on separation anxiety too, because I know that's a question that we got from many of you beforehand. We have a great list of questions from members that I'll make sure to get into this conversation. But first and foremost, Shawna and Jessie coming to us from Ocala. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's our pleasure. We love this, and it's awesome to see you again.
You too. And maybe Shawna, we could start with you. I I thought about potentially, I mean, your story is so interesting and I thought about summarizing it myself, but I wouldn't do it justice. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about how you landed in the role that you're in today as Shawna Karrasch Equine, starting at the very beginning. Like, what piqued your interest in positive reinforcement, and what was the path like to where you are today?
And really, if to really go back to the beginning, I, as a little girl, was we would go visit my granddad's farm, and he had horses on the farm that everybody would consider good horses, with air quotes, because what they were quarter horses who, and my granddad he was busy being, doing what he did. He was a neurologist and biologist and psychiatrist. And so he was busy, but he had this farm that we would go visit when I was a little kid. Well, this gets dark for a minute, but it's all relatable in the context of things. I was sexually abused from the time I was 3 until I was 16. So this experience, when we would go see those, and I told my mom when I was 4 that I wanted her to kiss me goodnight last and lock, and I wanted a lock on my door. And back in those days, I mean, I want to be honest here, my parents were not monsters. Now, did they have things that were detrimental and harmful? Yes, they did. But they did what they knew, and they did the best they could. So I think it's important that we not just classify them as monsters. But what ended up happening when nothing happened, I ended up going into learned helplessness and some disassociation in this area, where I just would disassociate. I would realize my voice had no power. So it was, so you go along, and I didn't feel sad. I just thought everybody did this, so you just grow up and you learn how to cope. But as we would go to see my granddad's horses, we would get in my dad's car to round them up. And they would be, because they would live, it was a 300-acre farm, and they'd live in big pastures for the week. And then for the weekend, when me and my cousins would get there, they would be rounded up so we could play with the horses. One day I was 6 years old, and I realized they don't want to be caught. And it struck me, I cannot do this. I didn't know the words. I didn't know the association, but I now know that I saw myself in those horses, and that we were doing what we wanted with them. We're imposing ourselves on them. And so I didn't know what that was, but I said, no more. I never want anyone to get the horses for me again. And I love the horses. That wasn't the thing. And my cousins still would get the horses. So if they did and they were there, I would at least go, do stuff with them. But I was very conscious of that. So loved animals, went on my way, wanted to do field research. Eventually ended up at SeaWorld. Because I grew up in San Diego, really. And I was doing tours and education, and a job came up in animal training. I tried out and I got the summer job, and then I stayed there for 10 years. This is where I learned how to train animals, period. And it was all positive reinforcement. There was no pressure and release anywhere in this equation. They could do it or they didn't. And they got all their food each and every day, all their social interactions. So I was doing that. And after it was probably about 8 years, and a woman named Elizabeth Bush Burke of Anheuser-Busch, she came to SeaWorld. They owned the park then, and she gave some of us trainers tickets to see a show jumping Grand Prix in Del Mar. So we all go, this little group of trainers go, and I was like, I want to do this because now I understood training better. Now, did I see stressed horses? I saw mostly stressed horses. There were two horse and rider combinations that made it, the horse and the rider made it look like a walk in the park. It looked easy, breezy, fun. And I thought that is the part. I know that we can do that. Well, I had access to Grand Prix show jumpers. I started asking people because of some SeaWorld connections. I started asking people, international people, and everybody said they can't be trained that way. It's not done that way. They aren't smart enough to be trained that way. And I just thought, with my own eyes, I've seen target trained in person. Target trained hyenas, meerkats, hippos, rhinos, lions, tigers, goldfish, giraffes, llamas. So I thought, I don't know why horses couldn't learn this way, but I haven't done it. So I can't say, and so finally I was reading People magazine, and there was this little blurb about a guy named Tom Dorrance. I didn't know who this was. I had no clue, but he sounded different than what I was hearing. So this is how long ago it was. I called him on the phone. I'd called 411 to get his phone number, and I called him on the phone, and we chatted, and he said, yes, definitely do this. You definitely need to do it. Come do it at my ranch. And I was like, I have to work, and for anybody who doesn't know, Tom Dorrance is basically the grandfather of the natural horsemanship movement. He is the one that they all looked up to, him and his brother Bill. So I then decided, okay, I'm going to take lessons. I started taking jumping lessons in Rancho Santa Fe, and then eventually a guy started hanging out, and I was taking lessons out. I was jumping, I was riding everything. I bought a horse within a few months. I was entrenched. And then I met somebody who was going to be my ex-husband eventually, but his name was Vinton, and Vinton's great. That's not, we're all good. It was my own stuff I had to deal with, but he had a friend named John Madden, who was Beezy Patton's husband at that time, who's eventually Beezy Madden. And we went to dinner because he's out there designing courses, and he said, tell John about the training you guys do with the marine mammals. So I yammered on about it, and you could see John getting more and more intrigued. And he went home at the end of that. We ended up going home and getting him a clicker, because we never called it clicker training with the marine mammals, but I had some. Gave him a clicker. He went, took it home. They had a horse that came to them that you could not have a riding stick on the back, on the ground. Your neighbor couldn't have one. They just couldn't be near him. And he called the first day and said, the first day he was back, and said, I not only got this horse to touch the riding stick, I can't get him to stop. And he said, if I got that big of a no to be that big of a yes as quickly, we must do this. Please move here. Let's start a business. Let's do this. Let's get this going. So I did. And Vinton and I moved there, and we started putting it into practice, because with my horse that I owned, I didn't put it into practice. I was busy trying to learn how it was done. So I was like, okay, now, did I feed him? Yeah, I kind of couldn't help it. But that is really kind of where it started. Then worked with them, and, there's a horse judgment, which a lot of people know about, and is jumping and the open water issues. And so that was where I really got started. And then from there, it's kind of grown and grown, and watched this movement, which nobody knew anything about. Now people really do. I used to look at the magazines, and nothing talked about the emotional health. Everything was this blanket, this footing, this, how do you get canter to parts? Not how do you help your horse want to do canter to parts. And now it's a different day and age. And I'm really thankful for that. It gives me chills right now, because, it's a movement you get to see change. And it's just that, anyway, so that's where I got started. That was kind of long.
That was amazing. I also have chills,
Oh,
and I think we can all collectively say, thank God I didn't try to do that summary on my own, because what a fascinating, incredible story that it it feels a little serendipitous, but it's not. You made all of this come to life through being a go-getter and being curious and being willing to put yourself out there, and you brought some you have brought and continue to bring incredible things to life for humans and horses, and your ripple effect just continues. Like you said, like this is becoming a more common thing in the horse world when you started, there was just it didn't exist at all. So we're going to dig into so much of what you just talked about, but Jessie, I also would love to hear about your story that brought you to where you are today, and tell us also how you and Shawna are working together, and maybe just kind of summarize what the work is and what the business is as it stands today.
Okay, so I grew up riding. I probably started riding when I was like 10 or 12, and just your normal kind of barn rat sort of kid. I did some of it out of my house, and then as I got more interested and invested in it, which I kind of, when I first started, I thought, I'm doing this for a living. I had a friend over that was with me playing, and she mentioned that she was going to go ride at her aunt's house, and I was like, I'm doing that. That's what I'm doing now. And I just decided from that moment, and I have not let go of it since. Maybe someday I'll grow up, I don't know, but so I got, as I got to be an adult, I got different jobs. I had jobs for eventually bigger show barns, and learned a lot. One farm, actually the farm that we're with down here right now, I'm still good friends, and I worked for this trainer, and I credit her with a lot of kind of my wide experience, because we rode 10 horses a day, I would say, while I was there. And I was there for probably, I don't know, 7-ish years or something. So in that time, I did a lot of riding and a lot of starting young horses and bringing them through to, the competition level, mostly the hunters. So then at one point, though, in there, actually, before all of that happened, I had read Shawna's book. My mom got it for me at a sidewalk sale. and she had gotten me a whole bunch of books, but her book was read. It was full of pictures. It was easy reading, and it made so much sense. I can't even tell you. I was like, what in the world is this? Like, I knew what positive reinforcement was, but I really knew nothing. So fast forward years, I saw there was at the Pennsylvania, or the whatever it's called, Pennsylvania Expo?
The Horse World
Expo.
Harrisburg.
Yeah, Harrisburg. That she was going to be there, and I wanted to meet her in person. So I specifically went there to meet her. She does not remember, which I find so rude. But, So I met her there in person. She was great. And then I used it for a 3-year-old that I was having trouble, getting on the horse trailer. And that worked beautifully for him. And that was really all I took. I didn't take it anywhere else. And then I had, years later, again, I had a young filly who I had sold as a long yearling. She went with the owner, who was wonderful, off to a trainer. And the trainer and the horse just didn't get along very well. And after she was in that program for a while, and eventually she ended up coming back to me, because it was not working for her, and the owner sent her back to me.
She was aggressive.
Yes, she was more than aggressive. She was kicking, biting, just like downright scary. So when I got her back, she couldn't go out with any of my horses that she grew up with. She would spin in her stall for what seemed to me like no reason. I couldn't understand why she was doing it. She was kicking out at the walls. She just was dangerous for everybody around her. And so I tried with her for a while. She had some really bad thunderstorm issues, and so just some different things that were going on, that sometimes I would just sit in the barn and cry, because I did not know how to help her. And I loved her dearly. I had pulled her out of her mom. Like, I knew her well, and she wasn't that horse when she left. So I remembered about Shawna, and by now we have the internet. So I looked her up, and sure enough, she had a website and she had these coaching calls, and I bought this package with the owner's permission, and kind of the rest is history. I did everything she said in those calls, and it made absolutely no sense to me. I was like, we're touching a target. We're like, I don't get it. But so then we went on, and the horse was amazing. And she has not only recovered, but is thriving. And she was with me for a number of years. She just recently moved down here to Florida with her owner. The same person still has her and is in love with her. So it's been a long journey but then we just somehow we started to get we got involved more and more. We just started doing more and more together, and before you know it, we were working together.
She breeds hunters, really, really lovely hunters. I mean, they look the part, they have the conformation, they move the part, they jump the part. She's really good at one at a time breeding, basically. I bought my young horse from her. So Henley is one that we talk about a lot. So Henley's down here in Santino's, so she's kind of minimizing that, but you really do a stellar job with that.
Thank you.
So you saw the incredible transformation with this horse that seemed like she almost had issues that, like, in your shoes, I would think, I don't know if this can be overcome necessarily. So like, these are some huge and scary issues. And with Shawna's guidance and using her method, this horse totally turned around. So with that, you kind of wanted to go, is it fair to say, all in on this approach and this method? And I'll leave it at that question, and then I have one more.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say yes, but I don't think I was that smart. I just was like, okay, it worked for this. It worked for A, B, C. I helped her through the thunderstorm issue by asking her to touch targets during the thunderstorms. When before that, I had watched that for some reason that summer there was just endless thunderstorms. It was like, I swear it was every third night there was a big one. And every time she would just reel in her stall, she'd just spinning and circling and carrying on and coated in sweat. And I just felt so bad, and I didn't know what to do. So I started doing this during the storm, and I was like, all of a sudden I had her full focus and just really loving touching these targets. The second I would walk away from her, she would just go right back. Then as I learned what was going on in her brain, I was like, okay, the neural pathways are very tightly, what's the word? They're wired to keep on doing this behavior over and over again. And until we give them the tools to unlock that, you're kind of going to get the same thing, or at least I was in that situation, especially. So it was definitely something that was amazing.
And what does the business look like today?
So now we have a membership. We have a certification of, certified professionals that we're working with. We do clinics. We started with clinics, actually, because clinics was something Shawna had done forever. And so when we jumped in, like when she first moved here, I was like, I don't know, do clinics. So we put the word out on social media that she was going to be doing clinics again, because she hadn't for a while. And I had 150 people contact me to try to set something up or to attend.
I believe it.
To either host it or attend it or something. And so we just hit the ground running. And I mean, I feel like we're still recovering. So, but yeah, the membership has been amazing. I think we've had that like 2 years or something like that. And the certification, we just did our first year in 2025. We just started our second year, and that's going great. I'd say that's the crux of our business right now.
And I think what's really important part of it is, okay, is understanding behavior part of it. Because like Addie and her aggression, that was not out of being mean. That was out of being afraid, and then people interpret it and they start labeling her and start thinking, well, she's just a mare, and as opposed to saying, why is this happening? So I think the science is really, and right now with neurobiology, it is just, we're learning more about our brains and the similar, so it's a time that we really can learn so much more. But you can learn all you want about the brain. You can learn all you want about behavior, but how do you put it into practical application? So how do you take that understanding the why and the how and what it looks like, but how do you turn it into the practical things? And that was Addie's situation, where it sounded silly just to say, just have her touch a target. And basically it was giving her autonomy, giving her the agency to do it or not do it with no repercussions.
I was so not committed that I wasn't going to buy a target either. I was just like, end of a broom. She's afraid. She was afraid of a broom. So let's
not a good choice.
I know, not at all. But at the time I was like, let's make that her target. Let's help her to learn to love the broom. Well, she loves brooms now, needless to say. But that's not the right way to do it. But I was just like, I don't know. I just kind of went with the flow. And before you know it, we were able to ride her. And I mean, when you would go to put your foot up on the mounting block, on the bottom step, even bend your knee, she would try to kick you or bite you. So it was extreme.
In those instances, you knew the trigger. But there's a lot of things where you didn't know the trigger, just all of a sudden, kind of like PTSD, where you're just kind of like, I don't know what's happening right now, but I don't know where that came from. You know,
she'd just be eating her hay in the stall and then all of a sudden just lose it.
Yeah. I love this as a starting point, because I think a lot of people listening who have horses with tricky behaviors, I guess is the way to describe it. Very few will have behaviors trickier than what you're describing. So we're starting at a place of like, there are possibilities, and let's dig into what this can look like. And my hope is that people can, of course, like learn more about what it is. But like you were just saying, Shawna, my hope is that I can uncover some ways that people can start putting this into practice, or like make those connections, or lead you guys to make those connections for them. I don't do anything here. Tell me first, when we talk about positive reinforcement, we talk about clicker training, target training, food-based training. Will you synthesize that for me so that people can kind of understand how those different approaches fit into what we're talking about?
Yes. And I think just in a little kind of a nutshell, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement refer to a plus and a minus, not a good and a bad. So that social kind of definition we have, where we think negative reinforcement means I beat my horse and positive reinforcement means I don't, is not actually how it was written. It's written by scientists. This is all based in science. These are proven principles. We didn't make them up. But so in a nutshell, pressure and release is the removal of the pressure. So it's negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is the addition of something that they value, something they want, something we often refer to as appetitive in that sciencey world, but it's something they want and something they like. So when we talk about positive reinforcement, we are talking about using something that's very strong appetitive, and food is the strongest thing we've got. It's just they need it to survive. But so when we talk about positive reinforcement, though, we're not just talking about the use of food. And this is where I think it can get a little bit tricky. We hear clicker training, and that can often be looked at like, yeah, that little cutesy, that's for dogs. And what do you do when you don't have a clicker? And you talk about the food, and then people say, what do you do if you don't have the food? Or you talk about, but really when we talk about it, we're talking about it in a whole encompassing way. So, and that's, I guess, technically positive reinforcement simply means the addition of an appetitive. But when we talk about positive reinforcement training from our stance, we're looking at digging into their neural pathways. We're digging into their emotional states. We're trying to be sure, because you can do positive reinforcement poorly. You can use food in a coercive, unethical way. So that the people don't think that might be possible, but it is. So we want to be looking the whole time at their emotional state. And one of the and how do we get them to enjoy doing what we're doing? And at the when we get really going with it, as we got to with the marine mammals, it wasn't about the food. They got all their food every day and they knew it. So the trick was, how do you activate their seeking system, the part of them that thinks this is fun and playing the game? And this is something that they're hardwired for. This is where it releases the endorphins, the dopamines, and it leads to oxytocin too. So now we have them, when we're doing one training over the other, we have them going, oh, I love this part. And that's what we want, is them to light up and be happy about it, but in a way that is that we can still be relaxed and keep them going. And this is one of the neurobiology geeky things, because I am a behavior geek, I gotta tell you. But one of the things that we're learning from neurobiology is that when we use negative reinforcement, we tend to light up the part of the brain that's responsible for fight or flight. Even if it's a mild thing, even if I'm going, Jessie, 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 I'm not hurting Jessie, but I'm annoying Jessie. And look, she even here, sorry. And she even, then kind of is like, stop. And that activates that part of the brain. So that part lights up. And when we use positive reinforcement, it tends to light up the part of the brain that's been referred to by scientists as the seeking system. So now we have two different training modalities are lighting up different areas, or reinforcers really are lighting up different areas. But what happens in those different areas, different chemicals are produced. So in the part of the brain that's responsible for fight or flight, it tends to be heavy in the cortisol. Cortisol happens all over the place, but it's heavy in the cortisol. When we use the seeking system or activate the seeking system, we have more endorphins and dopamines. So one essentially makes them feel a little edgy, and one makes them feel better, makes them feel good and happy. And so these serve a purpose in them. These are hardwired neurobiological things going on. And so that in a nutshell would be the positive and negative reinforcement.
That's incredibly helpful. And I'm curious, when we think about horses specifically, one, is it true that they differ so much from other mammals, similar to how you were describing initially? People were saying, maybe it's not a fit for horses. Is that true? And are there limitations that positive reinforcement training has that negative doesn't? And vice versa. This is the muddiest question I've ever asked,
Yeah.
but I'm basically like, we started out by talking about Jessie's horse, that this was the way that worked, and other ways, presumably including negative reinforcement, because that's what is kind of the norm to go to, did not work for this horse. So I guess I'll boil it down. How do you see this fitting into a horse's training, if we think about something like dressage or eventing or hunters or jumpers?
And it fits really well in there. But there's some caveats and things we have to look at along the way that can be kind of uncomfortable sometimes to address in the way you maybe have done things, or the history of the horse and how they got here. Training a horse isn't different than training anything else. One of the things that Jessie's really good at is creating really confident, bold horses. So they come out, I got my little Henley, and she's all bold and confident and thinks the world is here for her. So I didn't. And then she came right to me. So she really didn't have, and she was weaned in a thoughtful, long way where, we didn't create this separation anxiety, angst early on. And so she was very bold and confident. Training horses and training sea lions to me is very much the same. Sea lions are worried. They're looking over their shoulder. They're busy. People forget, outside of the orcas, all marine mammals are also prey. While they may go get fish, but they're busy going, but I'm going to get eaten, and they act on that quite a bit, especially the sea lions who we take out of their environment. So the horses aren't special in that way. I think the big thing, though, I did encounter that I wasn't expecting to encounter is the marine mammals didn't seem to have past traumas typically. When horses coming in had many different, I don't know what it would be necessarily, but they showed signs of some sort of trauma, which has hijacked their their neurologic state. So now they're kind of in this, their amygdala is all lit up, and we have them highly reactive, highly sensitive. We have epigenetics, which comes along. It means it can factor in when they're in the womb, even mom gets trauma. And now, so I think for years have bred that in. They've learned it from their mom, but they've also, the handling we do hasn't historically been done in a way that said, you know what? I don't think you're being stubborn. I think you're struggling. You know what I mean? We've all said, oh, the red mare, and kind of that kind of thing when that's not really a legitimate thing. If any horse is struggling with anything, 99% of the time it's out of fear. And it may look like we've worked with horses who want to kill us, that they want to kill people. And you don't just go bounding in. You're like, I'm going to open your door this much. You're going to be on the outside of the fence until you have a new, look at who I am anyway. So you're not quite so defensive. But I think breaking that down and getting them on track and seeing that in our own way. So when we if we start working with a horse and we might look at a horse and go, okay, yeah, but he's struggling with his pee off. But really the pee off typically is a symptom of something that's deeper seated. So to try and stop and go, okay, what is it? Pain? We always go physical first. Is there pain going on? But sometimes pain may have been going on. We've cleared it up, but they still have the association. Because that classic conditioning, that Pavlovian conditioning that happens with repetition can still be like, but I hate this. I don't know why I hate it anymore, but I do. And so it can be classically conditioned in the unhelpful way. But when we start with young horses, we're busy trying to get the basic cues, the basic positive things taught with a positive reinforcement background. But then as they move up, they're just like, oh, I love cantering. And they're like, I don't know why anymore. You know what I mean? It's not like I did it, you owe me. It is just we create these neural pathways that say this feels good and this doesn't. So the positive reinforcement can go all the way through everything. But it can also come in once you've started. There's sometimes we hit things that I think are sensitive, like, a horse who's struggling with his right lead canter. And we go, okay, now, is it the rider? Is it experience? Is it pain? We check the pain first. You rule that out. And not just your vet, but your body workers and your, all the, other people that can give you a good read on that. And let's say you've ruled it out. Well, now maybe it's the rider. So we'll take the rider off and teach them. We use something called the reverse round pen. The horse is on the outside and loose. And we're on the inside, like, in an arena or whatever. And we're on the inside. So we can teach them biomechanically to do it. And using the positive reinforcement without any lines, without anything. And then we can put the rider back on. So we kind of come in a side door and maybe have to rebuild something that maybe is particularly entrenched in a not great feeling. But I think the only limitations is our own schedule and agenda. I think sometimes we need to put our agenda on the back burner and say, and the people we've worked with, a couple of people recently last year and then this year, there are people that said, I don't care how long it takes. Well, those horses have turned a corner. The one is now showing at, a really big trainer's place. And she was told to sell the horse. But it is those people that said, I'm ready to do it. I'll take the time. And once in the long run, it goes faster. But in the beginning, we say, slow down, it'll go faster. So I think that there is not a limitation, but I think sometimes the people or our own agenda or our own reinforcement histories can get in the way a little bit. So it really can run the whole gamut. But there's, we're getting more, but there's very few horses that come along with only positive reinforcement. So then we need to kind of recognize where they are and figure out where their struggles are, where their good things are. So we really call them a crossover horse, but it's definitely something that you can do and help your horse. Do you have anything to add into that I didn't cover?
I think so.
Okay.
Is your guys' philosophy entirely positive reinforcement?
Well, yes, I think though, but here, let me kind of explain that. We want to bring our horses up with positive reinforcement and only positive reinforcement. We prefer to handle new situations or struggles with positive reinforcement. There's been gob written about traditional training, and oftentimes traditional training has been what has caused the problem. So not with nobody intending to do that, but you know, you have a horse who's extra sensitive, and what worked for 18 horses is too much for this one. So for whatever reason, they typically have a trauma involved with some piece. So we kind of unpack it and go that way. But we also are bringing our horses up to understand your basic cues, taught in positive reinforcement. So somebody puts a leg on, they go, oh, I know what that means. It means go forward. They don't even know the escalating pressure concept because they learned leg on, I go forward to that target, you know. So this is where we're going to come from, to the point where they're like, I get it, I know what to do. They can go to traditional trainers because by then they're already understanding your basic same cues with a different impetus or motivator behind the cue. So we want them to be resilient and not be, you know, little hothouse flowers.
And they have a very deeply rooted emotional state that says people are good, what I do with people is good, my life is happy. So
there was a horse I had that I got from John and Beezy, and his name was Mint, and he was the first horse that was started with positive reinforcement. And so they said, you're going to do it. I'd been riding 2 years. I was like, okay. Well, you know, I had my ex-husband who rode with George Morris, you know, for 5 years and did all that kind of stuff. So I had good people around me, but he learned everything with positive reinforcement. And so at one point it was down the road now, and he was all good. And he was jumper, super hunter, you know, super light little things and cues. Well, a woman, and people would ride him who'd never fed him, and he was just great. He didn't, you know, he didn't say it, just he loved it all because he had, his emotional state was so strong. Well, one day this gal comes and she wants to ride him, and I said, okay, yeah, fine, no big deal. And she's on, and then her dog comes in the ring. Well, she started riding him like a cow horse. She's yee-hawing with the reins like way up in the air and all her weight just shifting. I was horrified. I was like, you know, who does this to this precious little, but you know what? I stopped and I looked at his expression, and he was just like, okay, there's an answer in here somewhere. He wasn't frazzled by it, you know? So when it got loud and what would scare a lot of horses, he wasn't afraid. He was just thinking, okay, we're doing something different today. And I think that's an important element that we get to, that emotionally they're so solid that they kind of don't go around looking like stranger danger. You know, there's so many times I think that horses tend to be what we call neophobic, where they find new sights, new sounds, new situations to be dangerous. So they are stranger danger. They're, what's that? Why is that? What is that? You know, and if they see a jacket on the fence and we think it's just a jacket on the fence, we have to recognize, not to them, their reality is it may kill me. And we have to go, okay, I hear you. Well, let's work through this as calmly and keeping them out of that, you know, from the hijacked, you know, we want to keep them in the parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest. So we want to set out to change their kind of perspective on things.
Yes, that makes complete sense, because having an understanding that things are just going to escalate would be a scary way to live, a scary existence. And what you're describing, in just kind of building this foundation of trust and curiosity and fun and working together, I can see why your horse had the emotional stability to take something kind of crazy happening and not feel like the world might end.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you're kind of helping hardwire the horse's expectations. We have so many interesting questions from members, and one of them, you mentioned separation anxiety. Amanda Chance asked a question about separation anxiety that I would love to start digging into. And you guys posted just a few weeks ago in your learning lab, I think you talked about separation anxiety. So Amanda said, you've done posts on helping horses with separation anxiety. Can you walk us through your thought process here? So pretty broad umbrella there, but it'll help us start getting into it.
And whenever we look at any behavior, the first thing we try to do is, can we figure out why it's happening and what's going on in their head? Because the more that we can, the more we can have empathy and compassion for what they're feeling and not take it personal. You know what I mean? And think, oh, stop now, you're being a baby. So we kind of looking at, and the basics behind all behavior, if any behavior is occurring or increasing in frequency, something's reinforcing it. The end. They're either getting something they want or avoiding something they don't want. So when a horse starts to, the horse leaves and this other horse starts carrying on, they typically carry on until the other horse comes back. And then they're thinking, that's how I got the horse to come back, by my screaming. So we need to find a way, and to realize that it is terrifying for them for whatever reason. And oftentimes I think our weaning practices are not, historically been the greatest. And so I think a lot of, well, it's been shown in science that a lot of the early weaning and taking them from their mom abruptly has taken their safety away, because mom is much more than a food source. Mom is a sense of safety and guidance. And when we take that safety away, I think it starts this, oh no, I must be with the herd. And so it is the first thing we look at, and we think, well, they think being with their friend is more reinforcing than being away from their friend. Or it can be vice versa, because sometimes it's the one who stays. And so we start, and ideally with separation anxiety, if we have two components to it, we'll try to address both, like work as a team to address both horses as best we can, and make it where instead of it feeling, so we have it like it's like a scale. There's a lot of weight that says being apart is bad, and not that being apart is good. Every time we put a weight on this side of the scale, we start to rebalance it. Here's an area we get, well, as soon as we see it happening more than the panic, we tend to, and the scales have barely teetered, we tend to think we're good. So we kind of try to go extra to be sure that they start learning, well, time away, I have good things happen. So it's a twofold issue we may have there. So we start by thinking, okay, well, let's do it small enough that they can process. And that means sometimes it's putting the halter on, taking them out of the gate and bringing them back, because there is such, it's that much, they know that the halter going on, and they start their worry. So then they think halter predicts this, which predicts this, which predicts this. So we try to break it down to the smallest things and build a new reinforcement history. Sometimes we will create, we'll take like those step-in posts that you can make for horses, and make a little temporary, not really hot wire, but if they know the webbing and the tape, and make it even inside the paddock at first, just this little area. We take them in, and we might do a little session. Then pretty soon that same little contraption is right outside, but against the fence. And eventually we start moving that little area further and further away. But we only move one step in that direction when we feel like they're solid there, not like we ended good, but they started off, worried. We only want to go there when they're like, whatever. So there's many different ways we deal with it, because there's different scenarios, different situations, but we really are trying to create a new association. And then pretty quickly, you'll have the one that's going away and we always work on the foundation first in their kind of comfort zone. So they're like, I know a target, and the target's been proven that it becomes much more, it becomes classically conditioned, and it becomes like their security blanket. So you can just say target, and they're, and they go there very like something comfortable, and it represents the safety and the comfort, the endorphins, the dopamine, and even the oxytocin that even their mom, represented for them. So we can, typically you can get the one away quicker, because that one's like, see you later, Harry. I'm doing my fun stuff, but you still have the one who's there. So you have to kind of work on two sides of that, and just creating a new association. And I think it's important to recognize, the more you let the wrong thing happen, the wrong in our terms, you know what I mean? When we're thinking, I don't want that screaming, the more that they get to practice that, good or bad, whatever the behavior is, the stronger it becomes part of their repertoire. The stronger it becomes their go-to. So we try to keep these things smooth and without them. So now they're just keep practicing the good thing without triggering them to the struggle spot for them. Does it happen that we think we're good, then all of a sudden we're like, oh, oops, I got to back up a little bit? Yeah, that happens. But we don't look at that as a mistake. We just think it's all information that we can take in from our horse, and we will really struggle to listen to all that they're trying to tell us, because they're constantly communicating in their subtle ways. Did that lip just get square? Maybe it's no big deal, but maybe it's the beginning of them going, uh-oh, you're putting the halter on, and we don't need to just stop everything, but we need to go, oh, is tension beginning to rise, and really create a safe space for them.
It's so interesting to hear you describe what that approach could look like, because it's like, yeah, that makes complete sense. I never in a million years would have come up with it. And that I just finished, we did a book club on Starting in the Middle by Tick. And of course, he talks about working with you, and he was having a challenge with a horse, and you came in and made it look easy. And I feel like so much of this will be that way until there's enough kind of like exposure to this sort of work that it starts, that another person could start having some of these tools and ideas in their toolbox, because there is that understanding the concept, okay, got it, and then putting it into practice is really, you have to earn that, it feels like.
Yeah, and I think that we also have our own reinforcement history. We've spent a lifetime learning to do it one way, or and so when we think, oh, it's a struggle, we can automatically jump from subconscious to subconscious to go right to where we were, as opposed to, I came in the back door of the horses because I was like, I would just use a target. What do you do? I didn't even know. So I
Use
think
a whip.
yes, and I would think this juxtaposition, but that's where it's kind of a good place to say, I get it. And I have empathy for people thinking, well, I'm struggling to think differently. And that's why it's so important that I think the membership really helps, but having our people getting certified and having more people to go out there and really be able to meet people where they are, firstly, without judgment and all those things, but then to kind of say, hey, and we continue to be, because I've been doing it with horses for like 2 years now. It's a lot of horses I've encountered and a lot of recipes I've had to create. You know what I mean? Thinking, what could we do? So that's what we just want to keep sharing with people, that, and realize that as a collective, we can do so much better than if we're always trying to be alone, but
Yeah, totally. I love how you describe it as recipes. That makes so much sense. And just being challenged to kind of get creative for a specific horse's requirements is really interesting. And you guys are such a gift to people to be able to bring that experience in and apply it to their own circumstances. Okay, we have a couple of questions. These are different. Like, I'm not segueing any of these, but I think it's interesting to dip into these different topics.
okay.
Catherine Locke asked a question, and to be honest, you'll know what it means. I don't totally know what she's wondering here, but she said, how does positive reinforcement play into cooperative care, especially for horses with chronic pain or ongoing issues?
Okay, so cooperative care is having vet work that they're participants in and volunteering to be a participant in. So the cooperative care, this is what we did with marine mammals. I mean, we had an orca that we had to drill its teeth, and you're like, I think he's good, vet, go ahead. Oops, he's not ready. Sorry about your hand. So we taught them, to present flukes and do all the zoo things you see. So cooperative care is really, really, really important element, because I think that people don't recognize it, and vet schools teach very little about behavior. So they just teach them how to do it, and then they push them on out and say, go get at it. And there's so much more that can be done with a little bit of patience and a little bit of, getting over some of those things. Because I think even when the young days, a little horse needs to get his first injection or microchip, and it's manhandled and it hurts, and it begins to create this I'm out of control, I don't understand. So cooperative care and the positive reinforcement is super important, and frankly a very, well, I'm not going to say easy, but it is something that we have the steps and can do, and it really is super, super helpful in giving the horse agency. Even though they're on a halter and lead rope, we teach the stuff typically without. Like with Henley, I went in and I started saying, okay, can I hold your nose? just in her stall where, and she could, can I hold your nose? Can I put my finger? Can I do, you know, until she's like, yeah, I'm good with that. And then working it to the halter. So, so all of those things, and we try to proactively think about things. I want to be sure I can touch her eye before she has an eye issue. You know, so then I'm kind of having to learn on the fly when she's protective. But really, honestly, when we build that rapport and that trust, she will trust me far better with that. So here's an example. There's a horse named Bugsy. He was a horse of mine, and he got a thrombosis, and they said he has to have these medications, and he has to have 6 tubes a day, 5 tubes a day for 6 weeks. And some of them are just, you know, dissolved pills, so they're bitter, and I thought, oh gosh, I never prepared for this. And so, I mean, you know, little wormer here and there, but so I went in and I said, here are my 5 tubes. And every day for 6, and he went all the way away, then he turned back, and he came back, and he met me halfway, and for 6 weeks I could give him all of those without a halter and lead rope. And that was because of the relationship we had built. But the cooperative care, I think, is really an important component. And I think it's a component that is one of the fundamental building blocks of our relationship. If we can't touch them everywhere and do these things, yet we still have to, we're kind of, we're taking a withdrawal from our trust bank. We're pulling away from what we built up every single time, making it harder to rebuild. So I think that the cooperative care is a really nice way to do it. And we do try to also really read their body language and recognize when they're on the halter and lead rope, when we're at that point and the vet is there, if they give me a little thing that says, I am not ready, we respect that and say, okay, maybe we could get away with it, but this is going to do, it's going to make it harder in the long run. So then trying to retract that. But cooperative care and our veterinary care, our husbandry behaviors, our even grooming, you know, all of that should be something that they feel that they're participants in, and if we can recognize and respect what it is. And that can be scary that they said yes or they said no. And the horses saying no can be quite scary to people, because, you know, my horse says no, then what do I do? And it's okay, because we have a way to get around it. Then we go, okay, you told me something important that maybe I didn't recognize, but we have the tools with positive reinforcement to get them to love anything. I mean, I had a horse who you couldn't touch his ears without being sedated, basically. And then pretty soon I would just handle them, you know, down here and then up here and then up here. And I'd click and reinforce all the, till pretty soon I'd just hold my hand up and he's like, here's my ear, you know, and so we can turn that around. So that's the thing that we didn't have traditionally before. I mean, what's in it for our horse to hold for, you know, or do a canter depart or hold for an injection? Now we have tools that can really help do it. And I want to point out, positive and negative reinforcement are all part of the same training. They're all operant conditioning. We're just using different reinforcers. So it's not like this is something different. It's just the other side of the same coin, really.
Yes, that makes complete sense to me. Like one way or another, we're approaching the same goal. So
Yeah.
choose one way or another and know why you're making that choice and what the implications might be. Like you said, like positive reinforcement may be a more gradual process in the near term. So maybe that's a reason that somebody's choosing negative reinforcement, but it's maybe if people are thinking bigger picture, this might be a method that kind of like gets more traction in their approach.
One of the things that was really interesting that first week that I worked with John and Beezy's horses. So they picked horses. We came there. All I did was 3 5-minute sessions a day in their stall. So I click fed, click fed, click fed, click fed. That's all I did. I taught them to keep their head to themselves because that was a new concept. I didn't even think about that because of the marine mammals. So now I'm like, okay, keep your head to yourself. Then after 3 days, I went to 3 days where I added in the target. Now they're doing that, but I only did them in their stalls. You know, John and Beezy would watch, but nobody came in. Nobody's part of it. I would watch her ride. But then at the end of the week, and if you know Beezy, she's not talky. You know, she's not throwing out, you know, because a cute shirt, you know, that's just not happening. And so at the end of the week, she said, every single one of those horses you're working with is remarkably better in the arena. But yet it had nothing to do with the other. But it was just the endorphins and dopamines and the feel good. So when we can get it that quick and that short, that short a time, we're starting to affect other areas of the brain and their perception of us and what we're asking them to do. And when we give them the agency of you can do it or not do it, when we give them choice, there's many behaviorists that will argue, and scientific behaviors will argue that that's a primary reinforcement choice, that they can be in or out. But we've seen a lot of times we say, well, you can walk away if you want to, then they'll come back quicker. So it's important to listen and say, we're making a partnership here. We're not trying to have a dictatorship, you know? And so I think that and somebody asked my ex-husband one time, they said, okay, Vinton, and he was also kind of quiet. And they said, Vinton, when do you get rid of the food? And he said, you know what? I grew up getting my bit and getting my spurs and getting my stick, whatever I was told to get without hesitation. He said, the difference it makes in the horses, why wouldn't I put a few cookies in my pocket? And I thought that was really kind of a good way to look at it. The emotional difference we get when we utilize positive reinforcement comes forward when we repeat the behavior, whatever our impetus that we've chosen. So, you know, if you can find a way to do it with positive reinforcement, it was really going to bolster your relationship and that trust.
Yeah, I love that. That is a great answer and a great way to kind of reframe the question. Okay, we have a question from Joanna. She said, how can people enrich turnout, especially in smaller herd situations, to keep the horses mentally engaged?
Okay, and this is huge. Environmental enrichment. Some of the most bored horses I've seen is horses who live in a field in a herd. Yeah, 24 hours a day. They just are like wah wah, you know. And it's not always. We think they're living out and they're free. They're not. They're still in a limited environment, and so trying to and so environmental enrichment means engaging their senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, tactile, all of those things. And it doesn't always mean things they love, you know, and it doesn't mean toys, but novelty. So introducing them to things that are novel and are fun. Now, here's a little caveat we have. If you have a horse who is new to come to you that has a lot of trauma, one of the things they really kind of need is they need routine, and they need to know what to expect, and they don't need uncertainty yet. That when they're getting more set, you know, and more settled, the curiosity will start to come out and you'll get to those places. But so those guys need to have a little bit less activity, but as they heal from their trauma, it is far better to engage their curiosity. So we put things out, like we just did a little post where we had this baby pool. It's really a sprinkler puddle pad thing. And we just lay it out there, and the horses are loose. They can see it or not. Some were like, yes, I'm not getting anywhere near it. But the young ones are like, I'm in it, you know? And so you just kind of find things. It can be that you take different herbs, you know, you take some mint, or you take some rosemary, or you take, you know, figure out what's healthy and good for your horse, but you can put that around so they can simply smell it. Some people will make, you know, they'll make teas out of things and put out buckets with water that's incensed with these different herbs. Or you do hang a jacket on a fence, and then they just, you know, watch who deals with it. Make sure they have room to get away from it. You know, you're not trying to terrify them, but keep using your own sense of creativity. Even just putting things like putting sand in your paddock somewhere where they can roll in it and stimulates, and having there's anything that you can think of, new sights, new sounds, bubble machines. You know, we will have those free flowing bubble machines. That's a big one. You give them space because they're not all like that. But
we have a piano they can walk on.
Yes. So we just keep trying.
They're not expensive.
No, these things are typically on Amazon, and who cares if people like my horse would trash it? You're like, well, good, you know, at least. And it doesn't mean just throwing a jolly ball in and leaving it, because it's the novelty. You should really take it away and put it back. You can hang browse. You know, there's a lot of things that are fun.
And we can combine these things a lot of times with things that help us to, you know, help ourselves with the training issues. You know, as the little pool, it's tiny, it's low, the edges are like, you know, this big, and it has the water that comes in, and it's very, gentle water that comes in. You could turn it up or down, so it could be this high, or it could be a foot high. And we put carrots in the middle of it, And our yearling Augie, he just was like, well, I'm going to have to brave sticking my nose in this water. And his face was just covered in water. I mean, what a better way to get a horse used to having water on their face, or water in general, than to be reinforced by having a good time. And he can do it or not do it. No one was there making him do anything, but he became much more solid at water because of having fun. And we can implement those in so many different scenarios. We just need to try to, look and see how we can be creative.
There's a study they did back in the 60s, and what they did is they gave animals free food. Then they taught them to hit a lever for food. Then they gave them both options back. They tend to ignore the free food and go to the lever for food. So Augie, who could get carrots for not doing this, because we were just there, handing them out, he's like, no, I want to get the carrots in here. And so teaching them to play the game and empower them through the problem solving, they get bolder and bolder, and new neural pathways. Their dendrites, connect, and they start to be like, I like the learning. I'm good at solving puzzles, and it helps them to be bolder, more confident, and more curious.
And the neural pathways, they go in the other direction too. We can make it stronger for them to release more cortisol and flee from scenes. So whatever we're practicing, we're going to get more of. And the more we can practice it in a settled way, the more we're going to get more of that behavior. Because it's hard for them to think.
Yes.
When they are faced with terrifying situations, it's just like us. If a teacher calls on you and you were like daydreaming, and all of a sudden you even get this little rush panic, like, oh crap, I wasn't paying attention. That's not very significant to your safety, but it does, a lot of times it will cause you not to be able to answer the question, because even if you knew the answer, you might be like, uh-oh. And so, like, if you magnify that for horses who truly do think that they're in peril, they don't hear you when you're, upset, and they can't focus. So we want to put them in the ideal state for learning as often as we can, and we have much more success doing that.
Once they get in that fight or flight place, you can't really get them back unless you've practiced. So a lot of times people will use things and they keep going and scaring the horse until the horse gives up. But that's typically learned helplessness, which is what I experienced as a child. They're not more settled. And the backlash of that is it often creates more reactivity, not less.
I love talking to you guys, and I love you guys for the work that you're doing and for how you're helping people approach their life with horses, because almost all of us come into this with such a deep and ingrained love of horses. Like, we just gravitate toward them because it's part of us. And your lens of empathy and partnership and curiosity that kind of ends up being reflected in the horse, like the horse ends up adopting those qualities too, is beautiful and just sounds incredibly fulfilling. And I think a lot of people can find themselves in an uncomfortable spot on their horse journey, feeling like, I love horses, and why does this not feel right? And what you guys are describing feels just really right. And I'm so excited for people listening. I know they're going to want to, start exploring more of what this means and what this could mean for them. Will you guys describe a little bit more about where people can learn about your work and get involved in the membership, and just kind of take this to the next step? Because I know in 1 hour we can definitely pique that curiosity, but I know people are going to want to kind of just get more from you both.
Yeah, our website is shawnakarrasch.com. It's SHAWNAKARRASCH, and our membership is there, and literally anything that we have
blogs
is there.
And stuff.
Yep, there's blogs, and the membership is prolific. There's not only is there a ton of content, but there's a lot of different areas of content. So we have our own weekly podcast that we do in there for members only. We have an area that we call Ask Shawna and Jessie, which was developed from something Shawna did on YouTube forever ago called Ask Shawna, where members will ask us whatever question they have, and we'll sit down and answer it on camera. We have a monthly Q&A, so we'll talk to people live.
And especially important is the community. The community, it's such a safe place for learning and sharing and saying, I don't know anything. Is this okay?
Some of those social media scaries.
Yes, because some of those positive reinforcement groups can be quite punitive. You're like, what is happening here? I thought we were supposed to, but anyway, so we make sure it's a really safe place for learning, but they're an amazing group of people. So that's been a big plus for us. We love that.
I believe it. And I'm so excited. I hope that people listening, when you get into this, because I know that a lot of you will, please share it with us in the Facebook group, because I want to live vicariously and just hear more about what you guys are all experiencing and learning. But Shawna and Jessie, this was such a treat for me to get to speak to you guys and learn more about all of your areas of expertise, but also just you two as people and your stories. It was such a pleasure. So thank you again for taking the time and sharing everything that you're working on and all of the things that you are adding to the horse world with us today.
Thank you, Jessa. Thank you for all that you do.
And thank you to everybody for listening. We love having you guys here, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.